Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts to get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
Here we go, folks. We are back at it again and live on a Wednesday night. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever, however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us a part of your beautiful evening. We are live in 303 Denver, Colorado, folks. iHeartRadio, YouTube, X, Twitch, TikTok, and IG. That is where you could like, follow, and subscribe and keep you up to date on future and past shows. Just about a few minutes from now, Darren of Lions Syndicate is going to be joining me here to be talking about those Detroit Lions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here on the show. But so some exciting news, coaching hires continuing to happen. And again, now the coaching hires are starting to thin out. The only one left is basically the Washington Commanders. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well, as we'll have our show on Friday, and that's where we'll have one of our special guests who covers the Seattle Seahawks to basically talk about the organization and, of course, their culture. So it'll be interesting, but we have so many changes that are basically going on as we speak. And so, all right, so I want to talk about this before we have Darren coming on here in just about close to about 15 minutes. But listen, the Detroit Lions surprised every single one of us. I know most of you don't want to admit it, and I get that. But let's honestly just take the time to basically appreciate what we've gotten from this year. The Detroit Lions walked into this year with uncertainty of winning the NFC North because the Packers now have their franchise quarterback in Jordan Love. Minnesota was going to end up regressing. They were not going to be the same team that was going to be 11-0 on close games. They were not going to be that same team again. And their defense started to really kind of make a change. So they were going to regress, and Chicago is basically Chicago. There's nothing different about it. But I will say this, is that Detroit this year was the perfect opportunity for them to take the division for multiple reasons. Because one, they have a head coach who is emotionally driven, shapes the culture, but also cares about this organization and its players and its fans. And this is an organization that has had a losing record for a long amount of years. And they've been the laughingstock of the NFL ever since. This was a great thing for the Detroit Lions all throughout this entirety of the season for multiple reasons, and we all know that. But Dan Campbell, I know what a lot of people were like in the last few days. They wanted to basically kind of clown on the Lions. They wanted to basically, make a mockery out of Dan Campbell. But listen, it is very rare in the NFL that you'll have a culture setter like Dan Campbell. Look at the Chargers and with Jim Harbaugh. They've got now potentially a culture setter. Andy Reid in Kansas City before Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid came there. I remember their quarterbacks, Tyler Thigpen, Trent Green, Damon Heward, Brody Croyle, Matt Castle. It was a completely different group. They were coming off Herm Edwards and a few other coaches before Andy Reid arrived. He shaped the culture. They're now going to basically shoot to be a potential dynasty. In Kansas City, we can argue all day about this. Forget about the Taylor Swift thing. Forget about it, with this whole thing with Travis Kelce, all the rest of this stuff. But think about what Kansas City has done. Kansas City has reshaped their culture. And when Alex Smith was there as the quarterback, they still won the divisions. They still made it to the playoffs. They won playoff games, but they couldn't get over the hump than what Patrick Mahomes arrived. That's a sure fact. And so Andy Reid became a culture setter. Kyle Shanahan. We all know that basically when San Francisco, once Jim Harbaugh left, they hired a different coach, and that was a mistake. He's not a culture setter. He wasn't built for this. And so they then fired that coach, and they brought in Kyle Shanahan, a very smart offensive coordinator. They took a chance, and Shanahan, it was kind of a bumpy ride at first, but then they figured it all out. Very analytically smart, very much somebody who's an innovator, and then eventually shape the culture of what San Francisco is. We can honestly respect that, and we think that San Francisco might actually have a shot with a Super Bowl. It's a completely loaded roster. We know that they've got some dudes. Sean McVay. When Jeff Fisher was there, we know Jeff Fisher was kind of at the end of his coaching career. We kind of knew that. But we still respect him as a coach. He's gone to a Super Bowl with the Titans. He's done some stuff. He's a great coach. Nobody can deny or argue that. But Jeff Fisher did not exactly have the innovation than what Sean McVay had. And then once they moved to Los Angeles, they shaped the culture, they changed their identity, and Sean McVay, arguably, I think, could be in the rankings of being coach of the year. But there's so many of them. What about DeMeco Ryans? Former linebacker, knows the Houston Texans organization, and for years, they were also a laughingstock when they started in 2002. You all remember that. The David Carr years, Matt Schaub years, so many. And then this whole Deshaun Watson thing. Once Cleveland got desperate and they needed a quarterback, and it's another one. So Houston was able to get a slam dunk on a head coach and a star franchise quarterback, and that is exactly what the Texans have done. So culture setters are very rare to come by, but they're the best kinds of coaches. That's why with Dan Campbell, it was clear. He's a guy you could honestly, you could make a mockery of this all you want, but he is, in fact, the reason Detroit has new life. He is. And he's got a great cast with him. Now, it's questionable what's going to happen with Aaron Glenn. But I do think that they need to reshape the defense a little bit more. They should go and get defensive pieces, get some different player personnels, probably in the draft or maybe in free agency. This is a perfect time to do so. The best break you could get is basically have Ben Johnson back. That was the best break you could get. So to me, I think Detroit, you got to run this puppy back. That's what they're thinking. So I think in many, many instances, you can argue, this was definitely a roster that was built for success. They've hit on 6 draft picks, and they all have been home run hits. People thought that Jahmyr Gibbs was basically like a reach pick for a running back, but that kid is fast. You could argue, too, that David Montgomery was a steal of the free agency. he ran his tail off. I watched him as good as he is this year compared to what I saw him in Chicago. And he was a lot better. Staying within the organization, knows exactly how Chicago runs and how they work. That you can agree this was definitely a roster built for toughness. And Dan Campbell, regardless what you say about him, he trusts his guys. By the way, Jared Goff, this is the best version of Jared Goff I think we've seen since LA. And people were all kind of discrediting him and not even giving him at least the fairness and chance to prove the kind of quarterback he is. Now he's here. And so Jared Goff has had a great offensive season. By the way, I think he had a great postseason. He didn't throw a pick. He didn't make too many mental mistakes. He was somebody who honestly gave everything that he basically had for Detroit. And not only that, but even from the trade with Matt Stafford, Stafford did Detroit a solid. We can all argue and appreciate that. And so, but having a successor like Ben Johnson means a lot. Now, of course, unlike Philadelphia, which now Nick Sirianni's got to get his coordinators right. Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio come into the building after, I would say, arguably, it was such a downhill collapse for the Eagles after being 10-1 to start the season. So you got to get this right. Jalen Hurts has to look like his best. But in Detroit, you know the personnel, the players are invested, the city is invested. Hell, Eminem even came out and said, I will get you that Super Bowl. I mean, you have a rap artist basically invested in this thing. So what does that tell you? It's hard to walk away from it. I know Ben Johnson is successful, and he will be a coach one day. I can see him right there in the ranks of what Shane Steichen's doing right now in Indy. Ben Johnson will have his chance. But I think in the meantime, you're the Lions organization and you're the front office. You did a solid. Give Ben Johnson his $1 million raise. Give him a reason to stay. And go and compete in the NFC and go and get a shot at the title. They'll be back. Don't worry about Detroit. They've got a great roster. It's young. They're building. Penei Sewell's a hit. Aiden Hutchinson's a hit. Sam Laporta's a hit. And so is Jahmyr Gibbs and many others. I think what you should do if you're Detroit, and we'll ask Darren about this here in a couple minutes, but I think you should shape the defense. Shape the defense to where it's its best. I think you've got the edge and the front, right? You could probably go and get a solid linebacker, maybe one, and then fix that secondary. I love Brian Branch, by the way. I think he's a great pick. But they've got a lot of options. But yeah, I think if you're Detroit, you've got to run this back. Why wouldn't you? Okay. So it is kind of interesting to look at San Francisco this year. Because as we get geared up for the Super Bowl, now I will have a really good guest on Friday, Justin Harden, who's Jay in the Bay, great content creator with 49ers. Can't wait for that on Friday. But the thing about the San Francisco 49ers is this is the time to really shape this team to win another Super Bowl. And they'll be there on that pillar with New England, with Pittsburgh, and that's it. They will surpass Dallas. I'll get into them in a few. But the whole point and the reason of this is because San Francisco, they've had a great roster. But this is even greater than what the last time they've been in the Super Bowl. They got arguably, I think, a future Hall of Famer in Christian McCaffrey and plays much like his dad and honestly is going to live by his dad's legacy. Plus, they've also got a young kid who shout out to one of my good friends at East Coast Gridiron. They were at the Senior Bowl, but Luke McCaffrey was there. And he looked great. There's a future there. So this is the time to really do it. But not only that, but you also have somebody with a high IQ in Brock Purdy. I know he did not look great in his first half, but you know what he did do is he showed an immense amount of resilience. He did not panic. Even under pressure, he stayed calm. He stayed level. He stayed poised. This was it. I mean, this is sincerely the time. You really got to end up winning this Super Bowl. If you're San Francisco, we know that for years, they've been in the Super Bowl against the Ravens with Jim Harbaugh. And even with that team, they couldn't get over the hill. They couldn't get over the top. And then Kyle Shanahan's team that faces off against Kansas City the first time, they couldn't get over that hump. And Jimmy Garoppolo, and look, let's be honest, Jimmy G is a gamer. But even from then, before Brock Purdy came in, I mean, if it wasn't for that interception, okay, and if it wasn't for them being slowed down in the second half, that I think was what was the problem for San Francisco. They just did not have a consistent, solid game plan going into the entirety of the game. Look, you don't have to look cute. The offense doesn't have to look sexy in the first half. It doesn't have to look pretty. What it does is that you basically have to get first downs, get momentum, move the chains, and then score as much as you can, but save all of that for the second half, because that is the narrative that will be on newspapers and on internet media all week long, probably for a month. So, I mean, if I'm San Francisco and I'm Kyle Shanahan, and again, you're not going to get another chance like this. The NFC, and you just saw it with Green Bay, with Detroit, with multiple teams in the NFC, and the Eagles, they got completely embarrassed by Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is another team. You got teams cooking in the NFC. So if you're looking at a time to win a Super Bowl and to do everything in a big stage, now's the time. Kyle Shanahan wants to rewrite this script, and he wants to rewrite this narrative. He wants to get rid of that curse of having that 28-3 lead association from when he was in Atlanta. He wants to eliminate that. And then we can finally take him seriously. And look, I mean, unlike his dad had 2 Super Bowl victories. And Mike Shanahan was a thing of nature. He was a guy that took no crap, but you could tell the presence he had in Denver and even in times when he was in Washington. Mike Shanahan's a one of a kind, and Kyle walking in the same footsteps as his dad. This will be interesting. But I think to be in this again and to really show up, this year is the perfect time to do it. Because you don't have a great quarterback. You got a smart IQ quarterback that all he has to do is he has to just be able to execute the plays, get first downs, stay calm in the pocket, be poised, and at the same time, keep the consistency in the second half. That's all that San Francisco has to do. This is the roster to do it. They've got the coach. They got everybody there. And look, Steve Wilkes, I know a lot of people had some questions on him. The defense doesn't have to look as pretty, but they got to make major stops. This is the time where you really have to show up in the big stage. All right. So anyway, we have been itching to do this for a long time now, and I'm so happy that we're getting the chance to basically do this. But my good friend, and of course, I don't want to be a big time spoiler, but we've also got some stuff in the works that'll be exciting for all of you Charger fans up out there. But this is the spotlight for Detroit Lion fans. You guys love Detroit Lions. What a hell of a year. This is definitely the guy that produces the content for those Detroit Lions. I'm excited to bring him on. So welcoming in Derek from Lion Syndicate here via the Global Satellite Network, presented by Stream. You know, this was an interesting year, but I want to see from your perspective, because you covered this team for a very long time. This was, I'd say this was arguably the greatest year in the state of Michigan. I mean, the Wolverines win a natty, and then the Detroit Lions, what were the chances they were going to make it into the NFC Championship? Going from your experience and covering this team, because you've seen a bunch of these teams with Detroit for over the years. This has to arguably from its history, probably the best team you've ever seen covering this team. Am I right?
Yes, Jake, you are right, man. Being a teenager in 1992 when the Lions went on their last run, I don't remember much of that. Barry Sanders, Herman Moore, Brett Perriman, those guys, Johnny Morton. But this year, man, was completely different. We did something that we hadn't done in 30 plus years, which the Detroit Lions have only so many playoff wins in their entire history. And this was only the first time in 32 years that we were able to win a playoff game. Not only that, we had never won the NFC North, so that's another milestone. We hosted a playoff game at Ford Field, another milestone. So this was by far the greatest kind of run that I can remember seeing from my team. And it's tough, man, the way it ended. You know, we were up 17 points. I remember getting a DM from you like, hey, man, you know, soak it all up. And I remember telling everybody at halftime that this thing isn't over. You know, this is the number one team in the NFC. We got to give them all they have. And, you know, I don't know what happened, man, but I mean, overall, I'm proud. I'm excited, but I'm also severely disappointed because we could have got that monkey off our back, Jake. We are one of 4 teams, you know this, man, to never appear in the Super Bowl. And we were 30 minutes away. It's tough, bro, but I know we got to pick up the pieces and move on. But it doesn't diminish what happened during the season. That's for sure.
You know, and it's funny because, and even going to, and I won't.
Let me see it.
Alrighty, folks. Sorry about that. We have no idea what ended up happening. Internet drop and everything else. But man,
Technology, man. That's just that's how
I
it
know
goes, I
it's
guess.
like, and this ain't the first time I've had this problem. But anyway, apologizing for basically the delays, folks. But so basically, okay. So going back to Dan Campbell, Dan Campbell has basically done something no other Lions coach has basically done. I mean, we're talking from Rod Marinelli to Jim Caldwell to a lot of different Lions coaches, even Matt Patricia and many others. But I've defended Dan Campbell for a few reasons because one, he's authentic. He's real. He is what he is. He's emotionally driven. You could see that with him. And players love him as far as a culture setter and is somebody that's very invested in what he does. Now, we can make the argument he does have really good coordinators. Now, Aaron Glenn, it's questionable about where he stands in his future, but we can honestly say I don't condemn him with basically the call that he made of going on it on fourth down because he's mostly been doing this.
Right.
How would you describe, I mean, Dan Campbell, and especially with the 2 years he spent in Detroit, and how much of his presence has really reshaped of what the culture is in this Lions organization?
Well, I think you said it the best, Jake. The authenticity of Dan Campbell is probably his number one trait. All the players this offseason and during the season were saying how good it is to play for him, how you're going to get the real Dan Campbell, and that Jared Goff called him the greatest leader he's ever been around. And that's because of not only his authenticity, but the way he goes about his coaching. And from Hard Knocks to, kneecaps and all this other stuff, man, Dan Campbell is truly Detroit. And even though he spent just a small fraction of his career here, he was on our team, although he was injured when we went 0-16. And that type of guy, that type of player that was part of that, even though he didn't physically participate, is somebody that we really could use, man, to change the culture around. So Dan Campbell, and like you said, man, and with me, I'm okay with one of the calls. I'm not okay with the other one. And I think, but like, that's Dan Campbell. You live and die by him. And he's done that the whole time he's been here. And I just hope that going forward, he's able to kind of, I don't know, man, tone it down a little bit, take the points. If in games like this is a one and done situation. So that's my coach. I still back him, not agreeing with every call that he made this past Sunday, but it is what it is, man. But as far as the culture, Jake, he is Detroit. And I wouldn't have it any other way, tell you the truth.
It's funny about that because, and I use this as a perfect example, but looking at Nick Sirianni, last year he was in the Super Bowl. This year, the Eagles had a 10-1 start, and then all of a sudden they just had the most massive collapse in 1-6. And so now they get new coordinators, and they're kind of taking a mulligan from this season, and they're hoping he works. That's kind of what it is. At least with Dan Campbell is that he's got great coordinators. And I think the lucky saving thing is that Ben Johnson's staying put, because I couldn't imagine it without Ben Johnson. But I think part of that reason is there is a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what could possibly happen in Seattle or Washington. So the best thing to do was, hey, we'll give you your pay raise, but you are part of this culture. And I think that's the best thing that could happen. So going to it, you know what, Jared Goff, I want to say this. Jared Goff, when he came in out of NorCal, okay, he was a pure thrower in the pocket, probably the last pocket passing quarterback that I think we've seen now in the NFL. But a lot of the narrative is they're like, oh, Sean McVay's the reason Jared Goff got to a Super Bowl. Well, he changed that whole narrative the second he came to Detroit. And thanks to Matt Stafford doing them a solid with that trade. But I think arguably you look at Jared Goff, he had a great postseason. He never threw a pick. Yep. He was very consistent from that point on. How impressed of the growth have you seen with Jared Goff? And has he really kind of turned into that franchise quarterback instead of being, well, he's just a quarterback from a different system? How did you feel with that?
Well, you know what, Jake? I always was supportive of Jared Goff when he came over. As a matter of fact, when I heard that the Rams were interested, I said in a video that the only way I take that trade is if Jared Goff is part of it, because I watched a lot of Rams games and I'm like, this guy is not a throwaway quarterback. And I think the worst part about Jared Goff is that year one, that he was blindsided by the entire trade. He didn't even know he was traded until the deal was already done. I used to call him a strange man in a strange land over here. And we had some dudes on our team, man, that were, I mean, we were working with little to nothing. And Jared Goff still showed a lot of promise in year one. And I think now that he's got his confidence back, he's comfortable. He knows these guys. He didn't know them. He didn't know Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, anyone on the team. But these guys all came in here together, and I think they feed off of each other. And I think Jared Goff, he said that he would love to stay here. He feels like this is his home. He loves the city. He knows what the franchise means to the city, and he wants to be part of that. So Jared Goff, man, always believed in him. I'm glad he had a fantastic year. I'm just disappointed that we were unable to get to the Super Bowl, but I believe in him, bro. Even when we drafted Hendon Hooker, I was not like, Jared Goff is on his way out the door. I've always said we were going to extend him, and now it seems like he's 100% going to get extended. So I'm happy. I just can't wait till he got to the Super Bowl with the Rams, Jake. Now he can win it with the Lions, and that's what I want to see for JG.
It's so funny because I loved watching that game between him and the Rams, and the fact that, Matt Stafford comes back to the place where he left it all up on the field. And he was also, too, before Dan Campbell got there, I mean, he was the pure example of what all grit and all heart looked like. I mean, he sacrificed his body out on the field to basically ensure the Lions were going to win that game. But it's funny because I say it this way. Detroit is not going to go anywhere. I think the NFC, and I explained about this, about San Francisco, if this is the time to win the Super Bowl, now it is. Because the NFC, I mean, you got Green Bay knocking on the door. They finally have a franchise quarterback in Jordan Love. You've got Detroit, that's all about grit, and they've got fantastic players, and they hit 6 draft picks, which is insanity. And they're just getting started. And then there's also the Eagles that are hoping they bounce back from what their season was. Looking at this roster is so young. Penei Sewell, Sam Laporta, Aiden Hutchinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs. And you want to know something that's really interesting, and I like your opinion on it, but David Montgomery was the steal of the free agent market, and he ran great. He was a lot more efficient. Going into this offseason, I don't think there's really any massive holes that the Detroit Lions have, other than the fact of, I could use another corner and safety.
Yeah.
I could probably use maybe one more linebacker, but the rest of this, I'd be adding some depth. What's your outlook in the offseason?
Well, you know what, Jake? We had, like I said, year one was abysmal, and the whole team was just throwaway guys from other teams. And we knew going into the this offseason or the past offseason, that the secondary was a cause for concern. So Brad Holmes, he goes out and he drafts Brian Branch. He brings in C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley, Cam Sutton. I mean, revamp the secondary. Drafted a linebacker in Jack Campbell in the first round. Now he must address the defensive line. Pass rush, interior pass rush. He has to do that. That is the number one priority for me. We have to get a number one corner. I don't believe Cam Sutton is a number one. Very solid number two. But he was also on some of the toughest opponents in the league, and he did pretty well defending them. We have to get a pass rush. So one of my number one candidates, I know we'll never get him, is Josh Allen from the Jacksonville Jaguars. But this is Brad Holmes' time. He's going to have the most money he's ever had. He's going to have, he likes to trade up in the draft, so we'll see what he does there. The offense is essentially built. We could use a lineman here and there, but now he has to attack the defense. And I think the first thing we do is a defensive lineman, and then we branch out to the secondary. So if we can get our hands on somebody like Danielle Hunter or Brian Burns, I mean, you never know what happens with Josh Allen, even an AJ Epinesa free agency. I think that would go a long way to helping out that secondary, but we've definitely got to do defensive line and then attack that secondary as well.
Could I also make the argument that there could be a possibility, if need be, if it was basically, worst came to worst, could it also be that maybe potentially Chase Young might end up coming into a system like what Detroit has with Aiden Hutchinson?
Now, you know what, man? Here's the thing. We had an opportunity. Chase Young was big on my list at the trade deadline. He was the one that financially and draft wise, as far as capital, I figured would fit. And then I heard San Francisco got him for a compensatory third round pick. But the knock on Chase Young that I've been seeing from people is that he might not play all the way through. Now, if they sign Chase Young in free agency, I would be a bit surprised because I don't know if he was on Brad's list. I think he fits the mold as in affordability. But one thing that Dan Campbell said in his season-ending presser a couple of days ago was it doesn't matter how much talent you have. If you don't fit as far as what we're trying to do in character and personality, you won't be on this team. And that told me a lot about how they're going to attack the future. Not sure Chase Young is the guy that fits on this team. Would I be mad if we got him for little or nothing? I wouldn't be, because we need all the help we could get. So if we miss out on a Josh Allen, a Brian Burns, a Daniil Hunter, a AJ Epinesa, and we trickle down to Chase, I wouldn't be mad at that. But I tell you what, he's going to have the best year of his career here, or he won't be here very long. So I think that's the knock there. But Chase Young, man, I wouldn't be opposed because he was my number one candidate at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because looking at him currently with San Francisco, and San Francisco's got dudes.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is that I think, when you got to have depth, especially when a guy goes down, it's the next man up mentality. And I think, honestly, if you give him for an affordable price, and at the same time, you're not paying him so much, but you're still able to basically reload and revamp in the draft. You could possibly make an argument and make a case, hey, we're not asking you to basically be like what you were in San Francisco. We're asking you to just give your dog mentality. We want to see that Ohio State kid that we saw coming into the draft that is going to basically fit our system. So it's not bad to basically have for a depth. But
absolutely, because Aiden Hutchinson needs some help as well. So we have nobody, Jake, 0 people on that other side.
Yeah, and what's funny is I want to talk Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay. People were saying that Jahmyr Gibbs was literally a reach for Detroit. After I watched him this rookie season, I think some writers are probably shooting themselves in the foot right now. I love watching Jahmyr Gibbs, and with that duo running back set is so dangerous because Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, kind of almost reminds me and has that mirroring image of an Isaiah Pacheco in the late round. He's a guy that is fast on his feet. He's a guy that even if you brought so much toughness to him and you try to tackle him, he's looking for that. He's expecting that. And he's going to basically punch through any defensive line that comes through there. How impressed were you basically watching Jahmyr Gibbs? And can we make the argument? And this is what's funny. No Detroit Lion weapon has basically scored at least big time up in a touchdown in games like this. Could you make the argument Jahmyr Gibbs is a lot better than we thought he was coming in the draft?
Well, you know what, man? I personally, I made videos about this because I knew Swift, his time, he was on the last year of his contract, and I knew you could just kind of tell by his play. He just seemed like he didn't want to be here. So I started looking at other running backs, and I see this kid named Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'm like, this guy is a home run hitter. So when we trade, we had the 6th pick from the Rams, and that comes and goes. We trade back. Jahmyr is still sitting on the board. And I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if we trade Jahmyr Gibbs. And when we did, I was ecstatic because I knew that this kid was exactly what he did, bro. He played exactly like I thought he was. The only thing that I can't believe didn't happen is he didn't break one long. I believe, I'm like, man, but I think what's going to happen is he learned so much his rookie season. I think he's going to come out and we're going to see that next year. But I love this kid. I was not disappointed at all. He did not disappoint. He was the reason that we won a lot of these games because David Montgomery was out for, I want to say 3 games, and he carried the team. Could he carry the team if he had to be the leading rusher? The answer was yes. So, and I feel bad for him, bro, because he fumbled in this game this last Sunday, and it was a crucial fumble. And I know he's going to live with that what a rookie year to have. You kill it, and then that's how you end the season with a costly fumble. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get even more impressive as the year goes on.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? And you're absolutely right about that, which was kind of crazy because, and here's how I kind of break this down. One and then one last one. But The crazy thing is if I was Dan Campbell, and I'm going back to that game, and the thing about this is Detroit was arguably one of the best first half offenses I think we've seen now, and honestly in all of the NFL. Like Ben Johnson is so damn good, and eventually he will get a head coaching gig. I think this was the best thing to basically come back, retain your job as an offensive coordinator because there's unfinished business.
Mhm.
We can argue that, God, they're putting up like almost close to 27 points in the first half per game. And it's like you see the explosiveness. They run so efficiently. But I think at the same time, his play design is so creative. But to going into that game, I think, and what was the crucial spot that I think when defending Dan Campbell is you had a minute and 59 left in that fourth quarter. Take the field goal. You have plenty of time, and you got plenty of timeouts to basically go back, kick the ball off to San Francisco, and then force a 3 and out.
Yep.
Get the ball back, and then you can make a big play. I mean, that's kind of how I saw it situationally. Do you agree with that kind of thought? Because honestly, I think any coach will tell you that if you got time on and you got timeouts, I'd rather just take the points, know that I got plenty of time, only 2-minute drill, and get a 3 and out, and then give myself an opportunity to score. Because this almost felt like we're back in Dallas again. But I don't condemn him of his toughness, but is that kind of, do you agree with that kind of thought? Is this kind of the same thing you were probably thinking?
Yes, I'm up in the stands and I'm watching and I'm saying, well, he's got to take the 3 here because this is our last shot. There's no way we're going to score twice in 2 minutes if we don't take these points. And he's sitting there going for them. What is happening here? We didn't get it. And then we wind up losing by 3. So you know what, man, I think Dan Campbell is weird because I think he was in season mode, and the postseason is a different beast. You cannot lose games. You lose games, you go home. So I think that the press conference afterward, you could tell that his mindset, sometimes I think he needs to adjust it based on the situation. And this was not the time. Take the 3 points, kick it deep if you want to, try an onside kick. Worst case scenario, they kick a field goal. Best case scenario, we stop them and get it back. But instead, you put your offense behind the 8 ball there, and it is unfortunate, man. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, Jake. It was tough for me to get on today, and if you would have done this any earlier, I don't know if I could have done it because it's been so tough. We should be in the Super Bowl, and we're not. And it's tough, man. But I agree 100%. And I tell you what, I think Dan Campbell, one thing I can say is every year he's grown as a coach. And I think this year is no different. I think he's going to go into year 4 even better than year 3. And surprisingly enough, his contract is he's on the second half of it. So we'll be talking about extensions for both of those guys very soon. But that's my guy. He understands the city, the team. He is the city, the team. He's still in that kind of like infant stage to me. A lot of growth he needs to do. But I go to war with this guy, man. He's definitely my coach.
Absolutely. And I think the future is absolutely bright in Detroit. And it now they're basically pinning like, look, we have rewritten our history. 30 years ago, it was a laughing stock, and even longer than that. But this time right now, and like I love the fact that culture setters are so rare to come by.
Yeah.
Ian Campbell comes in, changes the culture. D'Amico Ryans comes in, changes the culture. Jim Harbaugh now is in LA. He's going to change the culture, and you're already seeing it right now.
Yeah.
So I think this is the perfect opportunity for Detroit, and I am happy for them. One last thing before letting you go and getting you some much needed rest. So Ben Johnson, as I've said before, he will eventually become an NFL head coach. I kind of see him in the same level plateau as what I saw with Shane Steichen. I think respectfully. But I think, and maybe you might be able to kind of go in the shoes of Ben Johnson. I think he's probably thinking, yes, the uncertainty. We don't know. I don't know who my quarterback will be in Washington. I don't know if I'm going to be able to really revamp Geno Smith. I may have to go and either trade or draft a quarterback. So the best option was to stay put. But I think it's more than that. I think you look at this season, about 27 points in the first half per game. But yet in the second half, things kind of slowed down. Is that maybe something that was lingering in Ben Johnson's head and basically saying, not only am I getting the raise, but I got to fix up my second half team? Was that kind of something that was lingering in his head that kind of pushed him more to stay with Detroit?
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it was, man, because I feel like just like the rest of the team, you got Josh Reynolds dropping passes, Jameer fumbling, that Ben thought he left something on the table. And all year long, the third quarter has been a problem for the offense. And I was telling everybody, our offense is what carried us all year long. If the offense slipped up at all, we lost. And that's what happened in San Francisco. So you could be on to something. I know he was on the St. Brown Brothers podcast and he talked to his wife, and him and his wife had a conversation. He said, I love it here. I love it here. Sometimes the grass is not always greener on the other side, Jake. So I think that he wants to finish what he started. He said the same thing last year. He also got a raise last year. But I think that this is a guy that wants to see this thing through, and he can tell that we're getting close. We're getting close. But absolutely, he's going to also take into the 2024 season and saying, you know what? We pretty much can dominate the first half. We've got to get this third quarter thing out, because then we get behind, Jake, and then we're playing a shootout at the end, and we have to score, set 14 points in 5 minutes to win games. And so I think that maybe that was a reason that he said, you know what, let me get my third quarter together, especially if he's going to be a head coach in the next couple of years. He wants to get that under his belt. So I never thought about that, man, about maybe that's something he doesn't want to leave on the table either, because that's a lot of reasons. The games that we did lose outside of the Baltimore Ravens, it's got something to do with that third quarter, man. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's it, man.
It's funny because, even when you look at young coaches, I mean, I'm kind of curious to see what Mike McDonald will do in Seattle. But, again, you go guns blazing as a young coach. And I get it. You come from a reputation where you're a creative offensive mind. But if the narrative was basically, oh, he's only just a first half offensive coordinator, then that's probably where you're probably thinking, you know what, I got to change that. I don't want to be just a one half guy. I want to be the whole damn thing. And I think that's probably the best narrative you could sum up about Ben Johnson. But I'm excited about this team. This team has a bright future. They're not going anywhere. This is at a point now, if you were looking at a Super Bowl window, I think it's open now.
Yeah.
I think people can convince themselves this window is open and it's only going to get better as long as Dan does learn from that mistake. Never change your way. Stay authentic and stay real, but be even smarter. And that is where the extensions will start to talk.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you jumping on here, Derek. Where can people find you, especially all diehard Detroit Lions fan, for the magical year they've had in 30 years? Where can people find all of your great content?
You can find me at Lions Fan Syndicate or Lions Syndicate, Detroit Lions Syndicate. All you got to do is start typing Lions SYN, and then my channel will pop up. Just hit 19,000 over there. We make content every day because we're diehard Lions fans. And even in this pain, we should be talking about the Super Bowl. Now we're talking about the offseason. We still got content coming out. So that's where you can find me if you are a Detroit Lions fan.
See, what's funny about that is that even with the result not being what it wanted to be, but you know what? Congrats to 19,000 subscribers. And it's still on the grind, man, because if we could get to 20,000, before the end of 24, that'd be amazing. But you know what? Even in a hard loss like this, there is always a bittersweet ending in the end. And so
I'll be there by the Super Bowl, Jake. I'm already at 19.1. So I'll be at 20,000, and I'll come back and put it in your chat in 2 weeks.
See, there you go. There you go.
It's been a pleasure, my man.
Absolutely. And for all diehard Charger fans up out there, just a quick wrap up as well. We've got something brewing up as well as for all you Charger fans who want diehard content and who want reasonable takes and analysis. Charger Syndicate is going to be coming out real soon. Stay tuned for that, guys. It's going to be amazing, and I cannot wait for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity, man.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate you coming on, man. Enjoy it, and I hope you feel better soon, man. Get some well-needed rest, and we'll definitely talk soon.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Yeah, there you go, guys. I apologize for everybody on the technical difficulty. Man, stuff like that, it does happen. But you know what? This show's not shutting down. I'll tell you one thing. We just got ourselves great Detroit Lions content. They're a great guy at Lions Syndicate. I was absolutely happy and very, very, very grateful he took the time to basically come on, talk with us, and basically give us what his reasonable thoughts are on the Detroit Lions. We're going to take a break from here, but when we come back, it's going to be a little bit longer, but we've got a lot to basically talk about. Jerry Jones basically came out and is not only very sure about what Dallas is going to basically look like for next season, but is also very sure about Dak and his future. This is where I'm going to look at this brand, and I'm going to be very reasonable about what the Dallas Cowboys, what they may look like in the next few years, especially still in the Dak era. Plus, what do we do about the Buffalo Bills? After all that mess, what do we do with them? So, all right, folks. Well, as you know, the show is sponsored by BetUS. BetUS, we are finally have a great partnership together. And by the way, we're getting geared up for Super Bowl. You don't want to end up missing these promotions that are going on at BetUS.com. When you sign up, link is in the description and more. When you sign up and your first deposit, you'll get 125% bonus in your bets and 30 risk-free bets, just as a part of saying thank you for signing up and thank you for joining the BetUS family. They got hundreds of different bet lines, from straight parlays to teasers, so much more. You don't want to miss out on the opportunity, and especially great promotions during Super Bowl week. We'll have more of that coming out there for you. Stay tuned on all social medias. We'll have all the information there for you. But we got a lot more. Casino play, so much more. Definitely check it out at BetUS.com. That's BetUS.com. Link in the description to sign up now, where the game begins. And we begin with BetUS.
Key Williams and Dante Criswell star in 7200 Seconds podcast Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Listen up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
Robert Lyle hosts Between the Lines podcast, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on Sports Wave Network. Snake Sports Talk Show is sponsored by Muscle Tech, with hundreds of supplements and vitamins to choose from, all packed with 100% all-natural proven ingredients. You can be sure that Muscle Tech will give you the edge and the boost to train and look like your fit and healthy best, whatever your goals are. Try Muscle Tech today and use promo code SNAKESPORTS to save 30% off your purchases.
Don't lose your seat today with SeatGeek. $20 off when you use that promo code SNAKESPORTS. $20 off on your first ticket to your favorite event, including Super Bowl weekend. Also, your favorite concerts, getting close to your favorite artists, and so much more with SeatGeek. Find out why they are the most trusted ticketing app right now in the business. SeatGeek.com. Promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off. Okay, folks, look. So I thought this was interesting, but Jerry Jones basically came out, and there was a few things that I thought was very interesting. But one of those is basically that when it came to Dak Prescott, I mean, they collapsed really bad. It was horrible. And so we all kind of know that with what Jerry Jones, and we know he's a very meddling owner. There's so much pressure that's on with the Cowboys. And any Cowboy quarterback that comes in to this organization, they feel an immense amount of it too. But here's my takeaway upon this. If I watch Dak Prescott literally play the way that he did, and he looks limited, okay, this is what we said about it. I am very critical of my quarterbacks. Okay, when you're making Mahomes, Herbert, Allen, Burrow money, even Lamar Jackson, you have got to make those plays. So one of the things that Jerry Jones mentioned is that he still has some optimism for someone like Dak Prescott.
We'll be going all in. We've seen some things out of some of the players that we want to be all in on. And yes, I would say that you will see us this coming year not building for the future. Is the best way I don't say it.
Well, you got Micah Parsons, you've got Trayvon Diggs, you've got Deron Bland. You got to have a future. One of the things that I've always said about Jerry Jones is sometimes as a meddling owner, you happen to be in your own way. I don't think he means to be this way, but I think if you really wanted to be honest about Jerry Jones and the kind of owner that he is, you look at how pressurizing that Cowboys roster really, really is. So with Dak Prescott, that means that there's more pressure into it. So was Mike McCarthy. But apparently he says he's all in on this. We're all in. We're going to basically win this one. You got to win playoff games. You haven't really looked the best since 95. And this is what was interesting about Dak Prescott. Here's Jerry again.
Dak has done nothing to change my mind of any promise for the future. I think I said in the deal that we'd go as far as Dak takes us in the playoffs. Remember that?
Right.
We'll go as far as Dak takes us.
Right. How you feel you're playing?
And that's how far we went.
Oh, right. So
okay, so my point is that doesn't change a thing. Okay. We'll go as far as Dak takes us.
Yeah, Dak Prescott in the last few years, and even from his best year was his rookie year. Okay, let's be honest about that. He had an O-line. Zeke was healthy, and he was in his prime. You also had a really good wide receiver core just before CeeDee Lamb with Amari Cooper and a bunch of other really good receivers. But I think we can make the argument that Michael Gallup is just not available, okay? You've got to make Dak Prescott work. I don't need this, okay, we got seconds left. We're going to run the ball. We're going to get a first down. Time's going to be running out, and we can't get another play out. And for Jerry Jones to basically say, we'll go as far as Dak goes, the playoff record does not lie. Okay, Dak has not proven that he's worthy to get into the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl, and that should tell you something. I mean, look, I like Dak. I think Dak is really, really good when it comes to the podium. But there are some things, and you're not athletically gifted like a Herbert or a Mahomes or a Burrow or Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson. You are where you stand in your abilities. And right now I can tell you Dak Prescott, I like him. I think his football IQ is great. But then when you look at the physical attributes, it's actually kind of limited. Okay? The NFC, we can make an argument, does not have the big quarterback play than what the AFC does. That's honest. That's reasonable. This year's draft is really going to be interesting because we're going to have an overhaul of quarterbacks. Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix. There are so many quarterbacks that are going into this draft, and I'd like to see where the NFC stands with this. Because again, you're going to get quarterbacks this year. You're going to maybe potentially get a little bit of some quarterbacks next year. because we know Quinn Ewers is going to be in that draft. I think that if Dylan Gabriel out of Oklahoma, now in Oregon, if he basically has a great year with Dan Lanning, he could be another one. But we can make the argument that the NFC is a conference full of hidden gems. I like Dak. And I like Micah Parsons in this defense. But good God, was it a letdown this year? And it had all of us fooled. I was sold. I got sold on by the Cowboys. But this is what you are when you have an owner like Jerry Jones. You're pressurized. He basically has his hands in the pies every single day. He cannot stay away from media. He has to basically let his voice out. Pressure has to continuously build. It's like, honestly, I picture Jerry Jones as like, he's like that migraine in your head that never goes away. And it's painful. I mean, Dak's been dealing with this migraine now for the last few years. Mike McCarthy, I think, in his tenure being the head coach of this team, he's been dealing with the migraines too. But Jerry loves yes men. Especially too when you got his kids like Stephen Jones and multiple others. But apparently, he seems to be confident that the Dallas Cowboys are all in. I disagree. Listen, I like the Cowboys. I think they're very talented. I've got a couple of really good content creators who probably might disagree, or they might be on the same similar side. But if you looked at the bigger picture, the actual bigger mirror of this whole thing, Dak is good, but he's not great. And you paid him. You overpaid him so much money that this is who they are. Micah Parsons, look, people may think Micah is delusional when he's on his show. I love the fact that he basically, motivates and hypes up his guys. But at the same time, there's a lack of realistic expectations. There's a lack of realistic perspectives. I just saw this with Dallas. Listen, Derek told me as far as where the Lions are not going anywhere. The Lions are cooking. Jared Goff. Honestly, I think Jared Goff is a better quarterback today than Dak Prescott. Honestly, last year, Jalen Hurts proved he's better than Dak. So you got to ask yourself this question. How long of this train with Dak Prescott are you going to basically ride on? Because there was a few things that was wrong. Okay. You get your asses handed to in the first half in a 27-0 run against Jordan Love in Green Bay. Jordan Love proved he's better than Dak. In a stable organization, without an ownership, you've got GM Brian Gutekunst who makes all the moves, but it's the town that makes that makes all the difference. Jerry's a meddling owner. Can we just agree that he's basically long past this whole thing? This is why the Cowboys, they're basically the sales pitch every year when it comes to you're at a dealership, and if it's that same sales guy that's there who's going to guarantee you, I use this reference as like John Barr, he's going to guarantee to sell you a car. But if you look over there at those trophies, you notice how much dust that there is. They haven't won it since 95. Give me something new. Give me something that's more innovative. Dak is good, but he's not great. Okay, this is as far as the Cowboys are going to go. Divisional round, that is it. As a Cowboy fans, you could come at me all you want, but this is realistic about Dak and the Cowboys. And honestly, Jerry Jones needs to get that through his head. But he won't, because he's all about protecting his brand. Could care less, basically, about the player. Anytime you're drafted or you're signed by the Cowboys, it's a fat payday. I mean, yes, you could thank Jerry Jones for giving you that money. But at the same time, if you want trophies and championships, that's your Jimmy Johnsons of the world. That's your Bill Parcells of the world. That is where you win championships. Not this. Not this. Yes, you can protect your brand. It's the most selling brand that's out there in the nation. But something's got to change. All right, so I'm going to shift to the Buffalo Bills here for a second before we wrap things up. But the Bills have an interesting offseason to basically go through. Now, the news on this is Joe Brady, he's now anointed as the full-time offensive coordinator. The Bills had a chance to beat Kansas City this year, and they failed to do so again. But here's what's interesting. Since Brian Dable left, Josh Allen was not the same quarterback under Ken Dorsey. They then go ahead and fire him in the middle of the season. They promote Joe Brady, who's an NFL experienced offensive coordinator who knows the strengths of Josh Allen. But the problem is, and look, I like Sean McDermott, but you got to be honest with this. This is his last chance to do this. The Bills are not going anywhere. As long as Josh Allen quarterbacks this team, they're not going anywhere. But listen, Sean McDermott, I mean, in the last few years, what do defensive coaches do? They get defensive sometimes with their coaching calls. You got to be innovative. You got to think of something that's new. Because I'd hate for Josh Allen, and just like in this press conference, that reminds me a lot about the Bills and what they really, really need to do. Because you got to find a way to basically silence this.
Josh, can you kind of put into words the frustration of not getting past that team again in the postseason?
Sucks. Losing sucks. Losing to them, losing to anybody at home sucks.
Indeed it does. And there's plenty of time because Josh Allen is young. That's the break you're getting. Josh is young. The other thing is the defense, they were riddled with injuries last year, but the defense still shows they are capable of anything. But at the same time, defensive coaches, when their star quarterbacks go down, they get defensive. And then they can't think of anything else. That's why you got to have a rock star as an offensive coordinator. That's who Ben Johnson is in Detroit. You know, that's what Kevin Slowick is in Houston. He does a lot. But the thing is that DeMeco Ryans is young. He loves his young player personnel. He could grow them well and develop, and that's the difference. Sean McDermott's time is basically running right now. And we're all paying attention to this. But it was interesting when I thought about this because if Sean McDermott was fired tomorrow, you know who honestly could be the perfect culture setter? I think it would be Mike Vrabel. What does Vrabel bring to the table? Because you know what? They don't speak enough about Mike Vrabel. I know Jim Harbaugh, it was hard to basically fill that in. That's what Buffalo was paying attention to. But look at Mike Vrabel in his time in Tennessee. The defense never gave up. If you actually look at the consistency rate, when the defense, whether it's the pass or it's the run, they have never slowed down. In fact, it was very linear with their numbers on the defense in situational plays. That's what Mike Vrabel is. Defensive coach, but he's also a culture setter. Okay, the culture in Tennessee, it runs through Derrick Henry. It ran through A.J. Brown. It ran through toughness. That's who Mike Vrabel is. If you imagine Mike Vrabel tomorrow with the Buffalo Bills, that means this team's going to only get tougher. And the AFC East, it runs through Buffalo. Listen, Miami, Mike McDaniel is a great coach as far as an offensive mind. Makes Tua work. They're fast. But you know what? They are honestly the beach vacation team because you'll go out there and you'll have a great time. But they are not fit for December, and they are certainly not fit for January. That's the reality. Tua becomes limited when it comes to January. As far as for Vrabel, Vrabel will finally have his quarterback that can get him over the top in Josh Allen. And at least with Josh and Joe Brady, because it's no Dable, but at least Joe Brady has been through this. He shapes his quarterbacks exactly the way they should. But I think, to be honest, and this is another thing that I think is also interesting. And not only Mike Vrabel, who could shape the defense, where A.J. Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, Jordan Poyer, a lot of these guys, they build a lot more toughness. They play situationally great. So, and again, that was the knock on it. The defense got hurt. They were not consistent. That is what Vrabel could bring to the table. Now, second scenario. If, let's say, next year, Sean McDermott doesn't win and he gets fired, here's another coach that I think would be interested in a reunion. If the Giants don't rebound from a no playoff season with Brian Daboll could be available. Listen, there is no time for underachieving their plan, their goal. That could be something that if Daboll was available, Josh would be walking into that front office and said, this is a guy who I trust the most, who developed me, who may be the quarterback and the player and the person I am. You got to get him back. I could see that. And you know what? Even if you retain Joe Brady, you got to have a rock star offensive coordinator, a guy who obviously solidifies your entire offense. But you know what's funny is offensive coaches. They've got rock star DCs. And it's funny because a lot of these guys that are available for head coaching jobs are all defensive-minded coaches. They could be great DCs elsewhere for the time being. Because coaching in the NFL is a dime a dozen, and it's a fantastic opportunity. Your 401ks, you're getting a chance to be closer with the players and develop them and build a culture along with their head coach. But I think that's two coaches I would consider if McDermott does not fit the bill. I'd be giving Vrabel a call because at least he'll have a trustworthy offensive coordinator. He could shape the defense of this team, which basically, because they're fit for the cold, they're tough, and you're not going to go away with Josh Allen. Okay, he's going to run this division. He's ran through Miami. He's ran through New England. And yes, Aaron, he'll run through you too in New York. Okay, they're not going anywhere. So, but you have to be able to get over the top. But I think a culture setter like Mike Vrabel shapes the defense and has more trust in Josh Allen than the abilities that we saw with Ryan Tannehill. He's clearly better than what Tannehill was. And so this gives you the boost. They won't have to feel like they've got to put on a cape every time and say, Josh, save the franchise. You got to stop with that narrative. Keep your run game consistent. Trust Josh's abilities, but give him support. The other thing is too, and the reports are, and even with the general manager there, basically said that Stephon Diggs right now, at this moment, is still the number one receiver. But they're also going to be basically asking him to take a pay cut. You think Stephon Diggs is going to honestly roll with that? He'll be pissed. But I think, honestly, if you're in the draft, look at the board in front of you. There's a few options I could very much trade for. I can go and get myself a Roma Dunze. I could go and maybe get that kid from Oregon or Keon Coleman from Florida State. This draft has many endless possibilities, but I'll tell you what's for sure. It's a quarterback, left tackle, wide receiver, and bits and pieces you sprinkle in with it a little bit of some edge rushers. That's this draft. So if you're Buffalo, think about what you got right now, because you know what? They found their running back in James Cook. They got Dalton Kincaid. Gabe Davis was hurt, who was very, very viable to that offense. So you clearly saw his presence hurt. The other thing is, they also got Khalil Shakir, that Boise State wide receiver, who's clearly an ace in the hole in the slot. You are giving Josh Allen enough support and enough of that ability for him to go out and do his thing. But don't just put all the pressure on him to save the franchise. That's not fair. Because in the end, it clearly showed against Kansas City. You shrink in games like that. So do yourself a favor. Honestly, you got to fix this thing, because if McDermott can't, only Dable and Vrabel, I would believe, would be my first calls. Got to have a guy that's going to keep the culture consistent. If Buffalo is going to eventually win a Super Bowl. The question is when. The AFC has an awful lot of expectations. You look at the quarterbacks, you look at the coaches, and you look at all their rock star weapons. That's what it is. Buffalo has plenty of time to basically make this up, but you have got to be able to trust Josh Allen, and he's got to look at you in the face to know you're going to support him and you're going to give him what he needs. All right, folks, that's going to do it here for the Snake Sports Talk Show. I appreciate all of you guys for jumping on and hanging out with me, guys. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulty, but you know what? Like they say in the NFL, you don't start off well in the first half, you got to find a way to come back in the second half. And I was glad we were able to come back in the second half. Like us, follow us, and subscribe and hit the bell button for all latest notifications on future and past shows. Go and watch a few segments on the shows if you missed on tonight's live. Special thank you to Derek from Lions Syndicate with being with us, talking Detroit Lions. Appreciate all of you guys for being up on here. This show is sponsored by BetUS, where the game begins. Sign up at BetUS.com for 125% bonuses on your bets and 30 risk-free bets. Also by SeatGeek. If you haven't done so and you want to find your seat, go to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code SNAKESPORTS, and save $20 off of your first purchase of your first ticket. Shout out to everybody up under the chat, Key in the building, and my good friend Dante. I will be hitting you up a little bit later on. East Coast Gridiron, appreciate all of you guys for being up on here tonight. But we are going to be rolling this thing back up Friday. You don't want to miss it. Justin Harden, Jay in the Bay, is going to be joining us talking the Niners. And also, we got a special guest who's big on sports betting. You want to get better at sports betting? Let It Ride podcast. Jeffrey will be joining us as well. Thank you all, and we appreciate you guys, and we will see you Friday night on the next episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Sayonara, and take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there.